Welcome, everyone. So my name's Alan. I'm a developer and a trainer. Just to put it out there into perspective, that's what I do. And at the moment, my role in the company is working with a lot of teams and looking at some of the legacy products that clients have or that we have ourselves and how we can take that and take it forward. Just to get a little bit of a feel, those in the room who are developers, could you please indicate by raising your hands? Fair number. Product owners? Cool. The reason I'm asking those questions will come clear later in the talk. So we're here to talk about legacy. Well, what is legacy? So of course we went to the source of all knowledge, Wikipedia, and it defines, in computing, a legacy system is an old method, technology, computer system, or application program of relating to or being a previous or outdated computer system. So your legacy apps are not the ones which are in the dark corner there of Cobalt. They are, this is fun. They could be the application that you just finished deploying and businesses said, yeah, that's great, but the desktop application no longer meets our needs. We need a web-based or mobile-based application. Let's see if the technician can sort this out while I carry on. So sometimes legacy is yesterday's deliverable. Now, for those of you who are here for the silver bullet talk on how to handle legacy, sorry, this isn't it. But what I am going to give you is I'm going to give you some strategies, some techniques, and patterns that we have employed to take some of our legacy applications or clients' legacy applications and bring them up to meet business needs today. So I'm going to share some of those learnings with you. And the first thing we need to start off with this is we need to make some decisions. Now, when you go to a team of devs and say, you know that legacy system, we need to do something about it, the first thing they say is, let's burn it in a pile over there and rewrite it from the ground up. Yeah, that's the attitude. Now, a tweet came out a few months ago, which hopefully everyone can read. Can those at the back read it or not? No. Middle you can. Okay, let me read it to you. So this is from John Sundell. Every time a company proudly announces that we have rewrote X from the ground up, all I can hear is we replace the bugs that we know with ones we don't know about. Refactoring, reworking, and properly maintaining a code base is almost always a better option. So that's what this talk is about. It's not throwing out your legacy applications. It's what can we do to take them and modernize them and meet businesses' demands today. Because sometimes that legacy application runs a business. It keeps it ticking, and no one wants to touch it. Even the infrastructure guys are playing to the hardware guards that the server it's on will keep running. So we're going to look at that part there, this refactoring. We want to try and limit how many new bugs we introduce. So what is refactoring? Once again, Wikipedia. So it's a process of changing our systems in small incremental patterns where we take something and we improve it without changing the factory, without changing the external behavior. So it's an internal process for devs to get their code better. There's a great cartoon, I should have put it in, just thought of it now, where a guy's looking at some code and cursing it. And his colleague comes over and says, who wrote that code? I did. And the guy's cursing it as the worst code he's ever seen. So he says, so when did you write it? No, this morning. And we need to have that attitude that we can always get better. We can always improve. And that goes for a new code base or legacy code base. The other part, a couple of sentences further on, they talk about refactoring applies standard basic micro refactorings. We want to keep this small. We want to do this well. The only way to do that is in these small incremental approaches. So, found this lovely picture. Legacy systems tend to live on this left-hand side. Technical definition, a big ball of mud. We want to get them into stages where we can start cleaning up one piece at a time. So what are some of the ways we can tackle this? And here comes the really technical stuff for those who aren't too technical. There's a concept from domain-driven design, which is Eric Evans' concept, where he talks about bounded contexts. We want to start breaking up our legacy application, which tends to be a behemoth, into small little individual sections. And what we do, which the cog represents so carefully, so nicely here, is we try and put use an anti-corruption layer in between to interface between legacy and new until we've refactored all of the legacy into new. So I said this was about decisions. Now we've got some to make. So you've decided you're going to refactor your legacy code base. You want to take it forward. And the first batch of decisions you need to make are about what is this technically going to be. The skills that you have in-house determine what new tech you can use for this. What frameworks are in place within your organization? What is the deployment target? Is this your first mobile app? Is this web where, up to this point, you've been desktop? Do you need to make changes to the database? Is the target so different that you need to take some time to do an investigation on how you're going to achieve this? And are there any infrastructure requirements? i.e., do we need new servers for this? That's a big decision. For some corporates, it's clearly defined. This is what all new systems will be, and we need to bring our legacy systems into that. That clearly defined thing may need to be varied a little bit to get your system there. The second thing is we've got a complex system. I've put in just a couple of layers. There could be a lot. You've got some database, some storage. You've got a data access layer. You've got presentation. You've got some interfaces. Where are we drawing the boundary? What part are we refactoring? For this example, I put one nicely there. That dotted line could be in the middle of the presentation layer. It could be we're just doing work on the mobile presentation. It could be we're changing everything from the data access layer up. You need to make that decision about what works for you. Perhaps you've got this really robust DLL sitting there which does all of your data access, which you can interface to and put new services on to build your web app talking to your old legacy database. Now comes the other part of these decisions. What is our delivery agility going to be like? How quickly are we going to give these refactorings to business? Because we all know in the waterfall world it was write the whole system, give it to business, and then you hope and pray. We want to be saying, okay, we've improved this piece. How can we deliver it to business? How can we add the value of that? We need to look at our budget. How much is business prepared to pay for the change of this legacy system? There's a threshold where keeping that old server alive costs less than rewriting it, and finding that balance which makes it work as a business decision. Next is how much risk are you prepared to take? If it's the peak period is between December and January, and you've got code freezes, that's probably not the best time to be tackling the legacy change and trying to get it rolled out. Rather look at your business patterns and go, well, that's where we're targeting to get it rolled out. Next up, what is the creative solution we're going to do for this? Converting legacy systems, refactoring legacy systems is hard. There's no denying that. And the solutions you need to come up with need to be creative. And putting it out there, the devs who created the legacy system are very likely not in a position to be creative enough to come up with the refactoring. And then the big one, compromise. Yeah, you can go to business and say, we've got this plan to upgrade this legacy system. And business goes, cool, how long is it going to take? And you say, 3 months. But it means you get nothing else in the middle of it. Can the business continue to function in that? How far can we go, reducing risk, managing all of those factors, and talking about that compromise with business so we can come up with a solution that works for this? So while you're making all these decisions, a pattern has emerged that you need a leadership, strong leadership to do this. It is not going to be something which one dev in the corner can go, I'm going to tackle a legacy system. It's going to be a team. And I've got some points here that we found we need a strong leadership team in order to do this. So I'm going to raise some of them to you. This leader needs to keep the vision, i.e., we are taking from X to Y. That is what our end goal is. We're keeping the team focused. We're keeping the team on target. They're also going to encourage and inspire people as they face the hard challenges. The devs are working together and they go, oh, that's cool, but I want to do it this way, and that one wants to do it that way. Or I'm so frustrated because of the boundary you described earlier on, I can't go and change that piece of code right now. That's what I mean by boundaries, is it's a piece of code you cannot change. They also need to be able to say no. To say no, now when I say no here, we want to improve the system by refactoring it. The definition of refactoring is you're not changing the functional aspect of the system. So business here is, oh, they're busy rewriting that system. So one of the exco goes, I can finally get my new feature in. And the leadership team needs to turn around to that exco member and say, this is not the place to do it. Or if you really want that feature in, we'll do it, but we're going to do it in the legacy system at the same time as we do it in the refactoring. Because one of the things that we have found is if you can work in a way, and some of the case studies I'll do later on, I'll talk about it, you want to be able to have your legacy system and your new refactored version running side by side as a way of mitigating risk. The only way to get a new feature in is to do it in both or to say no. The other part, it's managing the risk. It's looking at, this part is critical. This is the testing which is going to be involved. How do we go through that? And making some tough decisions. Sorry, I forgot the order that it came up. Making some tough decisions as to, you've got a deadlock. The team's got two ideas of how to solve the problem, and you need to decide, well, this is the way we're going forward. And I asked earlier on about the roles. You need strong tech leads from a development practice, because some of these are going to be technical functions, but you also need strong product owners in this leadership team. They need to work together to tick these boxes, because the devs may be going, we need to solve A, B, C, and they're hitting a deadlock. And the product owners goes, oh, but if you do A, B, and D, it actually produces the same result and is a lot simpler solution. And they need to communicate the compromise that has been decided in this and keep business up to date. Well, we went this far, and we changed, we prioritized, we didn't. Brought this slide up again because this is what we're keeping as our vision. We need to keep a mindset of going from where we were, going forward in an iterative way where we can make improvements on the system and get it to the next step. We want to build and slowly reduce this size and get more of these out. Now, I have a slide in here for a very simple reason, and that's you need to change to a startup mindset. In a startup mindset, there's a lot of compromise. An example, business, you've got a certain amount of money and you want to get a feature to market. You will develop what you need to get that feature out to the customers so they can use it. This may mean that you are doing a lot of the maintenance for that feature in the back end, where you're going and editing the database and putting up all your supporting data manually. If you ask devs what they want to do first on one of these legacy refactorings, it'll be, oh, I want to do the maintenance screens. I want to do the easy tables. I want to do that management process, which is not critical to business, but it's an easy solution for them. So you have to remember, this is a big journey we're going on, and it starts with small steps. Now, I'm going to give you 2 practical examples of how we've done this successfully. First one is a little internal application we've got. It's called Real 360. This was a desktop application, which is used for internal feedback of staff members. It was written in C# and spoke to a SQL database. Now, as our business needs changed, we had a problem where people weren't just running on Windows. People were not necessarily at the office. And you all know the state of South African internet, so VPN into an office is not always the best and most comfortable experience. So we said, how can we take this application and put a web interface on top of it, keeping the desktop application working? So we started off and we did, earlier on I mentioned an investigation. We said we're going to spike this. And 2 of us paired for 2 days and created a screen where you could go and fill in another colleague's appraisal, give them the feedback that you wanted. We made a lot of compromises in their process. We took the simplest form of the review. It was text only. But we were able to put the data into the same database by drawing the boundary that we weren't touching the database. The system used stored procedures. Those all remained exactly the same. We did that in 2 days, and then we're like, okay, cool. We've got something which is usable. How do we get it out there? And you realize we need some sort of authentication. We now need to talk to ops to get it deployed and available. So we went through that process over the course of the next 2 weeks and rolled it out to the teams. And reviews came around. People started using it. And the first iteration wasn't perfect. There were some bugs. I remember one person where he clicked save and nothing happened. Now, because this was presented to a bunch of devs, he went into his development tools in his web browser and sent a very technical fault report through. But it hadn't stopped him from working because he could still go and use the desktop equivalent of it. He was able to complete his objective. Over the course of many months, because this is an internal application, so it's the lowest priority, we went and changed each part of it. So the second iteration fixed the bugs from the first one, enabled users to be able to set up their reviews. And we went through the whole process. And at the final iteration, we had one part of the system left. It's scaffolding the questions. I'm glad I don't have any screenshots of how bad the interface was for that old system where it was grid, nested inside grid, nested inside grid, nested inside grid. It was a big problem because no one wanted to go and put new questions in for the system. So we made the decision that this is the last part. The rest of the system's stable. It's only question setup which could break. This is where we take away our boundary and we started making changes to the system to create an interface which worked. And that system's been live for over a year now. We've got it where it's used every day. The desktop app no longer works. Does not need to be rolled out, doesn't need to be supported or updated. So that was one success story, which was an internal. But internal doesn't mean anything to the business, to the rest of the world. It's a nice tick. We can do this. And that's an important part you may need to go through with your own teams. Because when you go to devs and say, we want to convert this legacy system with boundaries in place where we're not touching something, there's going to be guys going, nah, it's not possible. And the way to do it is spike it. Get them to believe in themselves that we can do this. And it's important that the tech lead and the product owner believe that it is possible to achieve this. Now, the second case study, it's a desktop application which we write for a client. We've been doing this system in various flavors for many years. Double digits years, in actual fact. And it's rolled out in Africa and the Middle East, and there are thousands of users worldwide. Now, that business has grown and the world has changed. When they started, desktop was the only approach for speed. It's got a lot of calculations. It's quite a mathematical system at its core. They wanted to get it. They're now realizing that the power has become available to make it a web-based application. So the challenge was laid out, how can we take this system and make it so that parts of it can be reused? And a year and a half ago, sat down with the team and we started looking at this. And at the beginning, the application was a nice ball of mud, where you had data access intermingled with your Windows forms. And we started looking at it and we started extracting pieces of it. So taking, should have put a slide in again, taking that big ball of mud and pulling out one little sliver at a time. And we took part by part and unwound it, changing the data access so that it was in a separate module. It's a separate component of this application now, where all the data access and associated business logic lives. Why did we do that? Because we can now go and put APIs on the front of that, which will allow users to create a web front end for that system. Now, that system had one monster in the middle. There's one key element of the whole system. And that element was the most risk. And in that particular case, we left it possibly a little bit later than we should have in the process. It wasn't left right till the end, but because it was so core to everything, it was a bit of a nightmare to get out. And that's the important part of this. You need to be able to take elements and tackle that hard part. You need to be able to go in and say, what's the most business critical part? If I was a startup, what do I need? I need that core. And we tackled that, and we were able to successfully roll it out where the client has given us very positive feedback. It has changed the way that they can roll out updates to their clients, because it used to take quite a while to do it with the older system. They're updating, and we can now have the conversation about, okay, so you were talking about a web version. We've got infrastructure in place to do that. Let's start tackling it. Okay. Now, I've given you a couple of examples there, and I know I've spoken quite quickly. So I have a slide which says thank you, but I actually have time for questions. And I want to challenge people to ask the questions, because I mentioned creativity. I may not be able to have the answers to all the questions that are about legacy systems, but let's have a little bit of a discussion and see how can we solve the problem together, or get an idea of how to take this into your organization. Anyone got any questions? So it was a balance. We added some additional people to the team. We actually ran 2 teams for that part. So one part kept delivering the new business features. The other team was running along, going at the refactoring. The client wanted it yesterday, but that's the standard client answer. And we just said, we'll do as much as we can. But what we were able to do was each iterative release to them, we could say, oh, by the way, these 5 parts have been changed. And you need to just go through and validate that we haven't broken anything in the process. Because being open and honest with the client is as important. They need to know about it, because it can't be, oh, why is the screen broken? We haven't touched it in years, and you go, actually, we refactored it. So there is an element where you still need to go through a bit of manual testing. As much as automated tests will solve a lot for you, there is a good sanity check that everything's still hooked up the way it should be.
And in saying that, how did you manage the delivery of new features on the old platform versus the new platform? And obviously you would have resource contention, because you would have some sort of handover from the guys developing the new platform to the guys that are maintaining and creating the new features?
Okay. So for those who at the back may not have heard the question, it's how did we manage the team delivering new features while we were busy changing the underlying infrastructure? And how do we get them up to speed? So we spiked it. We started off and we did one screen, one interface right the way through. And then we presented it to the team who were developing new pieces to the system. And we said, this is how we're going forward. So if you have to create a completely new feature, let us know and we'll help you do it in the new way. We don't want to be adding to the legacy while we're trying to remove the legacy. The other part was a lot of planning and a lot of negotiation. Okay, so you guys are working on screen, on this section of the system, we can go and tackle that part. When you've got the big one in the middle, it eventually came to, okay, this week we're going to do that, and we just need to get it done. And we had a long conversation with the client and said, this is the part which we need to get done in order to meet your objective of getting it out. So it is, as I said, compromise. But it is communication, early communication. Get the team to buy in. Because if the team writing the system and supporting the system doesn't see the new future of it, what's going to happen is you do all the work, you refactor it, you get it out, and a year's time you're looking and going, oh, we need to start again. And it's not because business changes, it's because your development processes aren't correct. Any further questions? Everyone relaxing after lunch. And we're doing this at the moment for other clients as well. We have teams, this is the way which we're working with most clients. We're always looking, how can we improve, how can we do it better, how can we draw these boundaries and start tackling little pieces. Because if you don't start, you're never going to reach an outcome. You always have to be talking, looking, adapting.
What was your metric of success with regards to all the usability of the old system and the underlying infrastructure of the new system? So that changed.
So I know one metric, but this is a dev's spec machine. This is not a client spec machine. So an upgrade process from one version of the system to a new version of the system on a nice dev spec machine with solid state hard drive and everything set up would take 10 seconds per project. It's a project-based system that they run. There are some companies which have thousands of projects. After we were finished with it, it took a second to upgrade the same project. The difference for the client meant when they roll out a new upgrade, they don't have to release on a Friday, so they can go and kick off the upgrades on big client servers over the weekend. They become a lot more flexible. So that particular project had a very clear metric. The web one is, you've got a new interface. That was a, yes?
Have you got any stubborn customers who refuse to go into the new system and just say, once the old thing's working, that's it, leave me alone? And are you forced to sort of keep something going in that space?
I think everyone here has that problem. Yeah, there are customers like that. But
How are you tackling it? Are you forced to keep it going, or just constant negotiations?
it's constantly encouraging them to change. We're busy dealing with a customer at the moment where we're busy in the scoping phase. Now, their system we wrote a long time ago, they then took it in-house and they've been maintaining it. Maintaining being an interesting word when you go back. And now they want to create a mobile application. So they have to change. They have to bring it and they go, how can we take this lovely new technology, which we want, and get out into the field and get data from here into our system? And so at the moment, it's been going on for a couple of years, but we're now actually busy defining the interfaces with the mobile devs as to what the system will be. So perseverance does pay off. The other one which you need to point out to people is there is a large security risk when your systems get too old. And we're in a world where, with POPI and GDPR, we have to start ticking off those security boxes. So unfortunately, businesses are not always in a position where they can go, it's been working for 10 years, it's going to continue working for 10 years. But yes, perseverance, lots of discussions. Sometimes it's like, I think the first time we met them, it was a website 4 years ago, this application, which is now coming to fruition. But it's going back, talking to them, discussing with them. Even went in and spent 2 days of training their devs and showing how it could work. Because the nervousness is, we've got the devs who know the legacy system. They haven't looked at the new stuff. Are they going to be able to support it? They don't want to go, oh, can you add one field? Because we want to add something to our front end. They want to be able to do, that's the sort of in-house changes that they've been doing. And they want to be able to keep that going. So we put out together some training. Here's .NET. Here's a new IDE. It's called Visual Studio. And that was how it started. At least they're using some version control, but it's not yet. It's a slightly older one. And okay, so it's an education process as much as a, here we go, let's tackle it.
Your second case study, you mentioned the applications across the Middle East and Africa.
Yes.
Were those all localized DBs? I mean, were those standalone?
The system works either locally, so on your machine, or can connect to a network server.
But it's still isolated to each of those users?
Yes. So if the user works on a network server and locally, that was the one with the metric 10 seconds to 1 per project, which is its own database. Okay, getting quite technical there, but that's what it was. So the guy could have to upgrade his local instance, then upgrade the server instance, because once you've changed versions, you can't connect. You have to upgrade. So yes, it was. It's a desktop application.
The reason I asked that question is because one of our, or two of our legacy products, we're moving them into obviously a big cloud-based system.
Yeah.
And that moves from a localized DB, whatever the flavor is, to now a logically separated cloud-based system across different customers.
Yeah.
And that's quite a challenge for us.
So, yeah, so the first section we did was putting together the interface so we can take a DB with all the logic talking to it, all the business rules, as much as possible, and say, okay, now we can put a web interface on top of this. So that was step 1. Step 2 is still under discussion with the customer, but that's their long-term goal. They've realized that they can't work in an environment where it is deployed locally. They want to get to it, and they've also got ideas about mobile apps as well. And you can't install SQL Server on iOS or Android. And Microsoft's given up on Windows Mobile, so they have to change.
Well, you should give another talk once you get past that.
Is that a question there? Any other questions? Cool, so we finished a few minutes early. I'll be around for more questions if you want. Thank you for coming. I hope you learned something.